Hi, Startup School. Welcome to What's New in Google Cloud Generative AI. I'm Nikita, and I'm here to share with you some updates on the latest and greatest in Gen AI. I'm a developer relations engineer on the Vertex AI team, and I've been with Vertex since basically the beginning of Vertex history. Today, we're going to kick things off with some exciting model updates. There are a lot of models to keep up with, and the space is constantly changing. So, at least for me, it sort of feels like there's a new frontier model basically every week. So, I'm hoping I can clear up what all of the new Gemini models are and why you would use them. So, at the end of 2024, we released the first model in the Gemini 2.0 family of models, which was Gemini 2.0 Flash. Flash 2.0 is the workhorse model for all daily tasks. It's really a balance of cost, capability, and latency. And what was really exciting was to see 2.0 Flash actually outperform the 1.5 Pro model on key benchmarks at twice the speed. So if you've already used Gemini and you've used the 1.5 models, you can think of Flash as an upgrade path for 1.5 Flash users who want better quality, or 1.5 Pro users who want slightly better quality and real-time latency for less. Overall, with this 2.0 release, Gemini's core capabilities have been improved. So that includes things like improved multimodal understanding, coding, complex instruction following, and function calling. If you were a user of Gemini 1.0, you can think of that 1.0 iteration as a tool for organizing and understanding information, while Gemini 2.0 is really all about making that information much more useful. So at a glance, here are some of the new features in Gemini 2.0 Flash. Like I mentioned, first we have this enhanced performance, but we've also added new things like new output modalities, new capabilities around tool usage, a multimodal live API, and a thinking mode. So let's take a closer look at all of these features. Starting with multimodal output. Now, back when we first launched Gemini in 2023, we were really focused on making multimodality a core part of these models. So that meant accepting text, image, audio, and video all as input. And with Gemini 2.0 Flash, we're expanding those multimodal capabilities with the ability to output multiple modalities like text, audio, and images. So for example, with image output in Gemini 2.0 Flash, you can output text and inline images. So think something like a blog post with text and multiple images all generated in a single turn, or maybe a recipe where you've got text instructions, but then images of how the food is changing as you continue to cook it. You can also do things like conversationally edit images or generate multiple output images. And previously, this is something you could have done. There are image output models, but you would have needed to string together multiple models. So what we're really doing here is kind of trying to reduce the amount of like duct taping and scaffolding that you as a developer have to do and really put all those capabilities just into one single model. Similarly, with audio output, Gemini 2.0 can now output high quality steerable voices. So when I say steerable, think, describing the texture and tone and intonation of the voice you want in natural language. Something like, speak like a pirate or speak in a fast-paced, engaging way. You can do all of this in natural language, and then it'll generate an audio file for you. Now, my one caveat here is that these two features are currently under allow list. Unlike text generation with Flash 2.0, that's GA, but image and audio output are currently under allow list. So until the access opens up more broadly, there are a lot of other cool features that you can actually try out today, and that's what we'll spend the rest of this session talking about. For example, the Multimodal Live API, which allows a user to stream voice and video into Gemini and get a voice response back. This is an API that helps developers to build dynamic and interactive applications. So for example, you might be talking directly to Gemini with your camera, with your microphone, and the model actually retains a memory of interactions. So let's say you were to show Gemini a book, and then you move that book out of camera. You continue your conversation, but then you reference something that was on the cover of that book. The model will be able to recall that previously heard or seen information. Additionally, the Multimodal Live API does support function calling and tool use, so you can build a multimodal interactive application. Something else you'll hear a lot around Flash 2.0 is this idea of built-in tool usage. You might also hear people call it native tool use. But what this basically means is that the model has been trained to use tools. And it comes with some out-of-the-box tools, including search as a tool. So you can add the tools keyword argument with a tool, including Google search, to instruct Gemini to first perform a Google search with your prompt and then construct an answer based on the web search results. What you'll get back in the response is a grounded answer as well as any citations. And what I think is really cool about this feature is that multiple searches can actually be run in parallel, which can lead to improved information retrieval by finding more relevant facts from multiple sources simultaneously and then combining them all for accuracy. This search as a tool also supports multi-tool queries. So, for example, combining grounding with Google search with code execution or any other custom tools that you've defined yourself. And another built-in tool that Flash 2.0 comes with is code execution. This code execution feature enables your model to generate and run Python code and then learn iteratively from the result until it arrives at a final output. So you can use this code execution capability if you are building an application that would really benefit from code-based reasoning. You use it pretty similarly to the Google search tool. You just add code execution as a tool, which you can see in the red boxes here in the code on the right, and the model decides when to use it. So I think the easiest way to understand this concept is really to just jump into a notebook and execute this code yourself. But as an example, if you look at the right-hand side of the slide here, you can see that the contents, so basically my prompt that I'm sending to Gemini is to calculate the 20th Fibonacci number and find the nearest palindrome to it. So out of the box, we could just send this prompt to Gemini and we could let the large language model use its capability of next token generation to answer this question. But this is kind of a math question. It's like a math programming question. And so it would really benefit us if we were able to write something in code and have it actually be executed. So that's exactly what the model will do. If you look at the response, you'll see Gemini constructing the Python code to calculate the 20th Fibonacci number, and that code will be executed for you in an API backend in a fixed, isolated environment, and all you'll get back is the result. Now, the last feature I want to talk about in the Gemini 2.0 Flash world is this thinking mode. So last year, we also released an experimental Flash thinking mode model. This is an experimental model that's trained to generate the thinking process. Sorry, say thinking process in quotes. It's not thinking the way humans do, but sort of what we kind of refer to as the thinking process that the model goes through in formulating a response. And so as a result, Gemini 2.0 Flash thinking is actually capable of stronger reasoning capabilities in its responses than the base Gemini 2.0 Flash model. The way that this works is it leverages something called inference compute or test time compute for enhanced reasoning capabilities. And so it's really suited for like specialized reasoning tasks, especially in math and science. And I would say overall, it's kind of best for complex tasks where you don't need low latency because the use of inference or test time compute will lead generally to the model needing more time to produce an answer. And we did actually release an updated version very recently, which includes new features like a 1 million input token context window. So that's a wrap on 2.0 Flash. But at the beginning of February, we did launch two new models in the Gemini 2.0 family. And the first is Gemini 2.0 Flash-Lite. That is Flash-Lite, not flashlight like what you used to see in the dark. But this is a preview model that is the most cost-effective Gemini model to support high throughput. If you, again, were a user of 1.0 Gemini models, you can think of Flash-Lite as an upgrade path for 1.5 Flash users who want better quality, but at the same price and speed. And the model does have a few fewer features and capabilities than 2.0 Flash. Like, for example, it doesn't include multimodal output, but it's still pretty powerful, and it has a 1 million token context window, which is actually longer than that really long novel War and Peace. We also released the Gemini 2.0 experimental model, and 2.0 Pro is our strongest model for coding and world knowledge. And it includes a 2 million long input context window, which, what is that, like maybe, I think that's something like 3 copies of War and Peace. Gemini 2.0 is available currently as an experimental model, at least currently while I'm speaking, in Vertex AI, and it's an upgrade path for 1.5 Pro users who want better quality or who are particularly invested in having that long 2 million context window or in code use cases. Now, because this is still an experimental release, or again, it is at the time of me speaking, some features that might have been available in 1.5 Pro and lower might not be available yet for the 2.0 models, but just expect more feature parity in the coming releases. So that's kind of an overview of all of the new 2.0 Gemini models. We had 2.0 Flash, which is the workhorse model for all of your daily tasks. It's a balance of cost, capability, and latency. It's probably where you want to start with your experimentation. But then we also have Gemini 2.0 Flash-Lite. This is the most cost-effective Gemini model to support high throughput. We have Gemini 2.0 Pro, which is the strongest on model quality, particularly when it comes to code and world knowledge. And then lastly, there is Gemini 2.0 Flash Thinking, which is the model that has enhanced reasoning and is trained to generate the thinking process to improve performance and really excels in math and science type problems. But that is a wrap on all of the new 2.0 Gemini models. How do you use all of these? Well, you can find them all in Vertex AI Studio. If you have never used this tool before, it is our friendly UI for experimenting with different generative AI models. You can find it in the Google Cloud Console, and there's a box that says prompt. You type your prompt in there, you select your model, and you send your prompt to the model. You can see on the right-hand side over here where I've highlighted in red all of the different Gemini models that I talked about. You can also see the status of the model. Is it GA? Is it preview? Is it experimental? This is very helpful because, again, these models are constantly changing. And so right now, Flash-Lite is in preview, but that might be different by the time you actually jump into the console and try this out. And if you don't want to use a UI console type experience, but you're ready to just start building an application right away, or you just prefer to interact with models via code, you can use the Google Gen AI SDK, which is something we released at the end of last year. And this provides a unified experience between the Gemini Developer API and the Gemini Vertex AI API. So if you've ever used Google AI Studio with an API key and then wondered how that's a little different from Vertex AI Studio, this Gen AI SDK provides a lot more seamless of an experience between the two different APIs. And it works for Gemini 1.5 models and above. So if you want to use any of those 2.0 models I talked about, the Google Gen AI SDK is the way to go. It's currently available in Python and Go, and Java and JavaScript are coming in the future. But if you're a Python user like me, pip install Google Gen AI is the way that you will access all of these new 2.0 models. So moving on from the Gemini family of models, in addition to those releases, I wanted to touch quickly on a new update for Imagen 3, which is our image generation model. In Vertex AI Studio, you will see a new model version for text-to-image generation. This is the Imagen 3 002 model, and it's actually been doing really, really well on the Ala Marina leaderboard. Here's a screenshot I took from not that long ago on the text-to-image leaderboard. And you can see this Imagen 3 002 model right at the top. The exciting feature, at least in my opinion, from this Imagen 3 model is the prompt rewriter, which is an LLM-based feature that helps to deliver higher quality images to better reflect your prompt's intent. So the way you use this is you can turn it on in Vertex AI Studio. If you look at the right-hand side of the slide, there's a little blue checkbox. I do believe this feature is turned on by default, but if not, just check that little box. And what will happen is behind the scenes, when you send your prompt to the model, it will be rewritten in a way to achieve better output. and kind of happen without you knowing, but better output that better reflects your intent in your prompt. So stepping away now from all of the models themselves, we've talked about Gemini 2.0, we've talked about Imagine updates. I now want to run through some features that I think just generally help you to prototype and build faster. Because at the end of the day, like I said, it's pretty hard to keep up with all of these new models. And really, it's about how effective you are at prompting with these models and not just about, how many different models you try out. And prompting is hard. I think it sort of seems easy because it's in natural language, but the truth is we're all still really getting used to prompting. There are so many different possible components to a prompt. A prompt might work really well with one model, but not for another model. And generally, what I've seen is for production use cases, a lot of iteration is required. So while you might have seen or used Vertex AI Studio, which again is that UI tool for prompting models that I talked about earlier, you might not be familiar with all of the different features and incremental updates that we've been making to help you prototype better and faster. The first is AI prompt generation, which is the ability to automatically generate a well-crafted prompt with a goal that you as the user provides. So the way that this works is if you click the Help Me Write button, which is this little blue text in the Vertex AI Studio, it'll pop open a box, and in that box, you can provide your prompt intent. So even easier than writing what you want the model to do in natural language, you just write in natural language what you want your prompt to reflect. So in this case, I wrote, need a prompt for hotel reviews, summarize each set of reviews and start with the positive, make up a set of hotel reviews to start with. And then you click generate prompt and it's created a prompt for me. It says you are a helpful AI assistant specializing in summarizing hotel reviews, etc. So I think this is really helpful, especially if you're new to prompting and you might not know kind of all of the different sort of tips and tricks and ways that people prompt. For example, saying something like you are a helpful AI assistant specializing in summarizing hotel reviews. If you're new to prompting, you might not know that that's a really good thing to put, or can be a really good thing to put at the beginning of a prompt. So that's kind of how I see this feature being particularly helpful. And once a prompt's been generated for you, you can insert it into the prompt box. And then you have the ability to do AI prompt revision, where you can automatically refine a prompt using simple natural language again and critique it synchronously. So maybe you get back the response from the model for that particular prompt that was generated, but it's not quite right. So here I've provided some feedback and natural language. I'm saying, okay, we need this prompt to be more specific and we want it to end with an overall summary. And then we'll generate prompt again. And if you look at the right-hand side of the slide here, you'll see the original prompt and then this new suggested prompt. The beginning of these two prompts is the same, so maybe not the best example, but as you scroll a little bit through the suggested prompt, you'll see this new update reflects the feedback I provided and looks pretty different from the original prompt. And then you can, again, apply and run these updates and keep iteratively improving the prompt until you get the response that you want. Now, if you want to try something a little bit more elaborate, you want to be a little more fancy, you can try out the Prompt Optimizer, which is a managed prompt optimization service to help you find the best prompt using any of your preferred models on Vertex AI. The way this tool works is it automatically optimizes prompt performance by improving the system instructions for a set of prompts. So basically, you provide a few labeled examples. This would be like input-output pairs of a prompt and a response. And then you configure some optimization parameters. You kick off this prompt optimization job, and what you'll get back is an optimized prompt for your target model. So this tool can help you essentially to improve prompts quickly and at scale without you having to manually rewrite your system instructions or just kind of like fiddle around with individual prompts. And I think this is especially useful when you want to use system instructions and prompts that were written for one model, and then you want to use them for a different model. So again, we keep having new models being released. It's really hard to keep up with them. You might have found this like perfect prompt that works with one particular model, but now the state of the art has changed again. And when you move that prompt over to your new model, it doesn't work quite as well. The Prompt Optimizer is a tool that can be really useful in helping you to kind of like in a optimized fashion, rewrite that prompt to work with the new different model. Slightly less exciting, but still, I think, an important feature to call out. You can templatize prompts and quickly swap data to be processed within the prompt by using variables. These prompt variables are useful if you are sending the same prompt repeatedly, but you're changing the topic or a couple of words each time. So when you add a variable, that variable name basically acts as a placeholder for the variable value, which becomes part of the prompt when you submit it. So I'm using that in the hotel review example from before, and the prompt variables here are just different hotel reviews that have different data, which is the reviews themselves. And lastly, for input data sources, you can directly provide public YouTube links, which allows you to process public YouTube videos. Or you can add public HTTP links, which allows you to process image, videos, documents referenced by URLs, all within the UI and all within this prompt. I personally have used the public YouTube link feature a lot. I'm often building demos or testing out new features with YouTube videos I've made before. And prior to this feature, I was always like trying to figure out how to download my YouTube video, which usually required finding the editor who helped me. And it was just a lot more complicated. And now I can just provide a link itself and ask Gemini, whatever it is I want to learn or understand about that video itself. Lastly, an exciting feature that I personally am excited about is you have the ability to interact with select third-party models in Vertex AI Studio as well. So we talk a lot about Gemini and prompting Gemini from Vertex AI Studio, but if you keep scrolling through the list of models, you will see this section called third-party models, and there is a collection of both Anthropic Claude models as well as Meta Llama models. So all of the features I talked about, prompting with these models in this UI, you can do all of that with not just Gemini, but with Claude and Llama as well. So even though I've talked a whole lot about models today, talking about Claude and Anthropic, I think leads into it's kind of a good segue into our next section, which is this open and third-party model ecosystem. Because Vertex AI it's fundamentally a platform for building Gen AI applications. And that is something that, kind of exists irrespective of whatever model you're using. So there's a whole open and third-party model ecosystem that's available to you through Model Garden. Model Garden is a library that helps you to discover, test, customize, and deploy select proprietary and open models and assets. And Model Garden itself is not new, but the list of models available for use on Vertex AI through Model Garden is ever changing. So for me, this is a constant source of, what's new with generative AI on Google Cloud. And for example, there are a ton of Hugging Face models to explore. So you can deploy any of these models to Vertex AI using one-click deployment. And deployment in this case means associating the model artifacts with physical resources for low latency serving. The way this works is that you select the tile for the Hugging Face model you want to use, and then you configure a few different parameters like the machine spec. This is the specific configuration of hardware, so think like number of CPUs and GPUs that you want to use. And then this list, and then you can deploy the model. And once it's deployed, you can send data to it like you would any other REST endpoint. So the list that you see here of Hugging Face models, this is something that keeps changing with models being added weekly. So again, it's a perpetual source of kind of what's new with Google Cloud and generative AI. And in addition to being able to kind of do this self-managed deployment process that I just described, which is available for all of the Hugging Face models as well as most other models in Model Garden, you can also deploy certain models, a select few number of them, you can also access a certain number of models through a managed endpoint. So you don't have to do any deployment work yourself. This is known as Model as a Service, and you can think of it as pretty similar to the way that you would interact with any of the Gemini models. Just open up your development environment of choice and you make an inference request. And again, Model as a Service is not particularly new, but the list of models supported is something that keeps changing. So right now, this is the current list of models that are supported, at least at the time of me speaking, but expect this list to grow as new third-party frontier models continue to hit the scene. So let's do a quick recap of all the latest and greatest newness that we've covered so far. I spent a whole lot of time talking about models and even more models. We talked about the Google models, like the new Gemini 2.0 models. We talked about updates to Imagen 3, but we also talked about some third-party managed models like the Anthropic models, as well as open models through Hugging Face. Then we looked into some tooling that helps to support and host these models and helps you to experiment and build with them. We have Vertex AI Studio, which is that UI environment for experimentation and prototyping, and Model Garden, which helps you to discover all of these different models. And lastly, something I didn't talk about too much today, but all this is built on top of our scalable cloud infrastructure, and that's the GPUs and TPUs and compute that really powers all of your inference requests, all of the training jobs, and really every application that you are building on Vertex AI within Google Cloud. If you want to get started working with any of these models, any of these tools, get started building new applications, I think the best place, at least in my opinion, to go is to our generative AI GitHub repo. This is maintained by my awesome teammates. They have created like literally hundreds of notebooks showing you how to use these different models, different features through the SDK. And if there's a use case or feature you can't find a notebook for, I would say send me a message on X because I think we've got a pretty comprehensive set of use cases here. So you should be able to find what you're looking for. And you can find all these notebook examples at github.com/Google Cloud Platform/generative-AI. There's also the Vertex AI Cookbook, which is a curated, searchable gallery of notebooks for generative AI on Vertex AI. It only includes basically the highest quality notebooks, but it also has searching and filtering capabilities, which is a little bit easier, I think, than searching directly in the GitHub repo. So this might be a good place to start even before you jump into the repo, just to find kind of the highest quality notebooks and be able to search over them pretty easily. And as a quick bonus, I wanted to add one more quick update to share with you all, but it's not exactly a developer tool like these Gemini models or the SDK or Model Garden or any of the other things we've talked about. But Notebook LM Enterprise recently went GA. And so if you didn't know, you can actually use Notebook LM on Google Cloud. This enterprise version is a highly compliant enterprise-ready form of the personal Notebook LM product. So if you're not familiar with Notebook LM, this actually went kind of viral last year for its automatic podcast feature, which allows you to generate these automatic podcast conversations out of a set of data that sounded very realistic and human-like and very much in the quality of what podcasts sound like. But essentially, Notebook LM is an AI-powered research and writing tool that helps you to summarize and extract information across dense and complex sources. So you can upload things like PDFs, Google Docs, Google Slides, website URLs, etc., and you build out this notebook with all these different sources. Once you've uploaded all of your data, you can chat with your sources and you'll get back grounded information. So the response will include a citation, basically a link to where that information came from in your big database of information. In addition to chatting, you can do things like creating those audio overviews I talked about. That's kind of like that automatic podcast feature. You can create notes, outlines, etc. It's basically a tool that helps you to learn faster from the data that you care about. So instead of chatting directly with Gemini, you can chat with a version of Gemini that has access to all of this information that really matters to you. And Notebook LM Enterprise looks pretty similar to the consumer version, but it just, again, runs in this cloud compliant environment. So your data is always within your Google Cloud project and it can't be shared externally. So it's a really good fit for people who have Notebook LM use cases where your data sources are, kind of proprietary information that needs to stay in a particular environment. You can upload all that information, all of your organizational docs, all of your source data, and have the ability to chat over that data, learn faster, and have that all be contextualized in the data that you really care about. Those are all the updates that I have for you today. Thank you so much for sticking around for this session. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Thanks so much.